Today on the show, we get a sign from the Beastie Boys when we needed it the most.
Can't you see? Everyone! They're here already! You're next!
Let's go!
Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born!
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So, people look for a sign. People look to have their prayers answered. People look to have their universe speak to them in some meaningful way, and it almost never happens. And when it does happen, what is it? Is it the stars aligning and giving you that which you need? Is it your prayer being answered? When people look skyward and go, give me a sign, and they find something that qualifies as a sign. Is it happy chance? Is it your mind seeking out something that works as a sign? Or is it divine intervention? I don't know. But I do know that the number of times I feel in my life that I've gotten a sign have been slim. I'm a skeptic. Do you believe? Do you believe in much of anything? I'm one of those folks that wants to believe in all the things. I want to believe in ghosts. I want to believe in the paranormal. I want to believe in extraterrestrials. I want to believe in all that X-Files stuff. I want to believe, but, well, I'm also a very fact and demonstrable proof-based type of person. So I want to believe. I want to believe in signs and things of that nature. But I have a hard time thinking of too many things that I've ever seen that qualify as a sign. Except for this past week just gone by. I was away. I was off last week. I was off on a pilgrimage of sorts. I went to see the surviving members of my favorite band of all time, the Beastie Boys. There's been a massive press surge. The Beastie Boys have been absolutely killing it as they've been promoting this book of theirs. A weighty tome. Nearly 600 pages long. And look, if you're any kind of a fan of music and the history of music, let alone a fan of Beastie Boys, I would recommend reading it, picking it up. It's well worth your time. It's well worth your $40 or whatever the book costs. And by the way, the audiobook, a completely equally pertinent experience and different from reading the actual book. And I don't know exactly how to describe the book and the audiobook, but I can tell you that it is like everything Beastie Boys have done, in that they give you more than you were expecting. They give you the unexpected, and they do something different from anything else that anyone has ever done before. It's amazing, it's genius, it's unique. It's funny, it's heartwarming, it makes you think, it makes you feel. It's awesome, even if you're not a Beastie Boys fan. Well worth your time. But I went on a bit of a pilgrimage because, well, Beastie Boys announced that they were doing these live events in support of this book. And I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I knew they were going to be reading from the book. And I also knew that there was a very good chance that this might be the last time we got an opportunity to see the surviving members of Beastie Boys, Mixmaster Mike, along with the great MCA and Mike D on stage. This is a band that's meant absolutely everything to me over the years, so I made a point of being there. So off I trekked to Los Angeles. Not knowing exactly what I would be looking for, not knowing exactly what I would see, but knowing it was vitally important for me to catch one of these live Beastie Boys events. And by the way, I got to tell you, I went as a fan. I know there's a lot of people that think, radio, music industry, you can just get into stuff. I never, ever do that. I never, ever call someone and ask for tickets. I never do that, except for this time I did. This time I did. Not because I was trying to be cool or trying to be down, but just because I was so paranoid that I would miss it. Beastie Boys are absolutely everything to me, and these events have been selling out in a matter of seconds. And I called up every record industry connection I knew that might be vaguely connected to Beastie Boys, looking for tickets just to avoid disappointment. Just so I could make sure that I got there, because I knew it was vitally important. And I couldn't. Nobody had any idea how to get in. Nobody had any line on tickets. BC Boys were very, very strict about making sure that people didn't have industry hookups, that everybody in the audience at these very small theaters that they were doing their BC Boys book events in would be true fans that were there for the right reason. And so I did what everybody else did. I sat with my finger hovering over the buy button, waiting for the tickets to go on sale. And the second they did, I got some. I couldn't believe I got some, but I got some. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating fast. But the moment I knew I'd gotten them, I was beside myself with joy. I knew I hadn't missed it. And then I did all the things that one has to do as a fan. It was general admission, so I stood in line. It was a theater with seats, but there were no assigned seats. You couldn't buy better seats. You couldn't buy cheaper seats. You just had to get there. First come, first served. So I lined up for hours outside this BC Boys event, waiting to get in. And every part of doing all the things that I'd done as a fan when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old made it that much greater when eventually I walked through the doors and rushed to the closest seat to the stage that I could get, which was an amazing seat. But you know what? They did it in a theater that was small enough to where everyone had an amazing seat. There was no way to be disappointed. There across the aisle from me was Ad Rock's wife, Kathleen Hanna from Bikini Kill. Before the event had even started, it was already something I was so happy to be at. With my ticket, I got a copy of their book. I was sitting there reading it joyfully, waiting for them to take the stage, and then they did. And in ways I can't describe, it was everything I would have hoped for and more. Seen them live a couple of times growing up. BC Boys have never disappointed, and they did not disappoint that evening. I don't know if they're going to be doing more of these events, but if they are and you are able to go see one of them, whether you're a massive BC Boys fan like me or whether you're just a fan of music and history or having your heart warmed and being entertained, go. It was great. The moment I saw them on stage, tears started rolling down my face. And they told the story of the songs that form the soundtrack of our lives. And it was brilliant and perfect and amazing. But we were talking about a sign, weren't we? That I got a sign out of this situation, which I did. And it was something that I saw when I went upstairs to stand in line to buy my BC Boys sweatshirt. What did I see? Going into the election tomorrow, it couldn't be more relevant. We'll get into it next.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
If you are like me, you look for signs sometimes. Now, there's a lot of people that feel like they've been given lots of signs, that prayers have been answered, that they've had some sort of connection with a long since passed away relative or something of that nature. A lot of people have seen or had signs. I'm not one of them. I'm a skeptic. I don't necessarily believe in them. I don't feel like I've ever gotten too many of them, but I'm always on the lookout for them because I want to believe. I'm like the X-Files. I want to believe. The paranormal, ghosts, ESP, horoscopes, all that stuff. I want to believe. I'm a person that relies on tangible proof, and therefore I've remained a skeptic for most of my life. But I got what I could say is a sign this past weekend just gone by when I went on my pilgrimage to see the BC Boys on their BC Boys book tour. Now, why the BC Boys mean so much to me? Well, first and foremost, there's the music. There's the fact that every time I put a BC Boys CD in my CD player as a young strip of a lad, I was greeted with something unlike anything that I'd ever heard before. License to Ill. Well, it was the biggest selling rap record of the time. It was one of the first real rap records It was something that set a bar, an alarmingly high bar for generations of rappers and musicians to come. It was the biggest selling debut album of all time when it came out. It was a cultural phenomenon. It was 3 Jewish guys from Brooklyn, New York City who changed the face of music forever. That's what License to Ill was. When it came out, when I was a wee strip of a lad, when I was a kid, no one had ever heard anything like it before. And then Paul's Boutique, which kind of sort of didn't do so well, but was, again, completely next level. The production elements that went into it were unlike anything that anyone had ever heard before. It was remarkably ambitious, and, well, the world might not have been ready for it, but if you listen back to it now, it is the masterpiece that we have come to know and love. Then Check Your Head and Ill Communication into the Five Boroughs and the mix-up. All these records represented Beastie Boys doing 2 very important things. 1, not sounding like anyone else. And 2, doing what they wanted to do musically. There were all sorts of pressures to conform to what other people were doing. There were all sorts of pressures for them to make records they didn't want to make. They tell a great story in their book of someone wanting them to make an MC Hammer diss record. And they're like, "What? We've never met the guy. He seems all right. Why would we want to make a record insulting someone? We don't have a problem with him. We're not going to do that." There were all sorts of times where Beastie Boys were encouraged to be something and do something that they were not. And on License to Ill, they'd had being something they were not backfire. Fight for Your Right to Party started as a joke, as a goof. They were lampooning everything that was going on in music in the 80s. Guys with bouffant hairdos screaming party at the top of their lungs. All the ridiculous metal bands that were coming out at the time that they thought were so silly. It was meant to be a gag, a parody of all those things. It was, of course, enormously successful. And they thought it was a joke, but then they realized the vast majority of the rest of the world were not in on the joke. And they realized, oh no, we're kind of sort of becoming what we hate. They experienced a huge amount of success at a really young age when people weren't in on this joke, when people didn't recognize it for the goof it was. And for a moment, they became that which they were making fun of. They became what they hated. And they learned a very important lesson from that very early on. They learned that we're only ever really going to do what we want to do, what feels right and good to us, whether it's musically or ethically. We're going to do the things that feel good to us and right to us. And in doing so, they were always the people that, well, they never followed anything. If you were a kid in the 90s growing up, Beastie Boys were the barometer of cool. The sneakers they wore, the t-shirts they wore, the music they made, it was always first to the party. And you know what's interesting? They were trendsetters. Not intentionally, not because they were out to set trends, but because they did the things that felt right to them. And the world responded to it going, that's cool. We want to do that too. And for that reason, they were never chasing a trend, never following anything other than what was real and true to them and what was in their heart. And that is, I think, what was so important to me as a kid growing up. I mean, besides the visceral response I had to their music every single time I put it on, besides the fact that their concerts were some of the most amazing things I would ever see in my life, these massive, transcendental, joyous events where people lost their ever-loving minds because they were, pound for pound, one of the best live bands that has ever graced the face of the planet. Besides all these things, they were never followers. They always set trends because, well, they didn't care about trends. They were doing what was real to them. They were doing what was in their heart. Now we go back to The Sign. As election day is drawn ever closer, you probably notice a lot of peer pressure. Probably notice a lot of people asking you to see things their way. A lot of people telling that if you don't see things their way, you're an idiot. Telling people that if they don't conform to their way of thinking, they're a moron that hates America. Now, what's interesting and paradoxical to me about America is this country that's supposedly built on the idea of individual liberty. But boy, have we become a nation of joiners. Boy, do we want to be cool. Boy, do we want to kid ourselves that we're individuals by joining large amorphous groups. People will act like they're afraid of you if they can't slap a simple, easy to understand label on you. And you know what? They might very well be afraid of you. We seem to have fear of that which we do not understand. Not only in America, but in the world. And for that reason, it's very important that everybody falls into a simple, easy to understand, easily categorizable? Yeah. An easy to categorize box. People have to know, are you Republican? Are you a Democrat? Are you a left-leaning Democrat? Are you a far-right Republican? Are you an establishment Republican? People that say that they want nothing to do with the establishment find another group and join and slap a label on themselves. They're only too willing. But I want you to know as you go into the remaining time we've got left of this electoral cycle, that you, me, all of us should feel comfortable voting however we want to vote, regardless of what party a person is part of. As I was walking upstairs to buy my Beastie Boys sweatshirt, they had a display of Beasties memorabilia, handwritten lyrics, original drum machines, passes from tours gone by. Unbelievable stuff. But there, handwritten Beastie Boys lyrics, I ran across a line that had spoken to me then, has spoken to me my whole life, and spoke to me very loudly. A sign, if you will, going into this electoral cycle, going into these elections, going into everybody encouraging you to vote, but really just wanting you to vote the way that they're going to vote. There's a line, there's a lyric off of Check Your Head that goes, "This is what I've got to say to you all. Be true to yourself and you will never fall." Even if it wasn't the Beastie Boys. It was a sign that I needed to see and hear, and a reminder that if you are true to yourself, you will never fall. Bear that in mind as you're casting your vote.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, you might love Jon Stewart because you're a lefty. You might despise Jon Stewart because you're a righty. But either way, Jon Stewart said something that was incredibly insightful this past week just gone by. And it really speaks to the dialogue that we are having with one another in this country. And, well, the fact that dissent is a healthy thing for those that are looking to divide and conquer. So, if you are a Jon Stewart fan, you're probably ready to listen to what he had to say with bated breath because you think he's a genius and you want to hear more from him. Ever since he left The Daily Show, life just hasn't been the same. If you are a righty that's despised him for all the things that he's said and done in the past that has hurt your guy or girl's chances, then I want you to suspend that for a second and just listen to what he had to say when he sat down with CNN's Christiane Amanpour with Dave Chappelle next to him. Stewart said Trump's attacks on fake news have affected journalists because they take it personally. Basically, Jon Stewart has said that Trump is using journalists' narcissism against them, and that is why he wins. He said that journalists are, quote, personally wounded and offended by this man. He baits them and they dive in. What he's done well is appeal to their own narcissism, to their own ego. They, meaning journalists, say, "We are noble, we are honorable, how dare you, sir?" And they take it personally. And now he's changed the conversation to not that his policies are silly or not working or any of those other things. It's all about the fight. It's all about the fight between the media and Trump. It's all about the fight between Americans. Every once in a while, you hear the narrative that we need to come together as one, and that's all great and well and good. But then whenever there's sort of any question of him being able to hold on to whatever sort of popularity competition he feels he's winning, he goes back to the fight. And this was not lost on Jon Stewart, who said it's all about the fight. He's able to tune out everything else and get people focused on the fight because he knows he's going to win that fight. The CNN folks said it was hard for us to be dispassionate when words from the White House are aggressive against us. And again, Jon Stewart said something incredibly insightful that really speaks to the status quo with regard to discourse in this country, the back and forth. When the folks over at CNN said it was hard for us to be dispassionate when the words from the White House were aggressive against us, Stewart said, "You're not used to it. Think of the communities of color. Think of Muslims. Think of the black community. When journalists rise to this outrage of how dare you say that about us, think of the lives that they've been leading under this and what they've been put under." And it's true. The media, and by the way, there are no allegiances in Donald Trump land that last longer than it's useful for him to last. He 100% calls the shots. He 100% defines the terms of the situations. He'll go hard and heavy against the folks over at Fox. He'll go hard and heavy against the folks over at CNN. I mean, obviously, he's going to have more in common to get along with when it comes to the folks over at Fox. He's going to have more collective back scratching going on with the Foxes of this world than he's going to have with the CNNs of this world. But they've gotten into it. And when it's convenient for him, they're fake news. And that's a level of distrust that has been sown between the public and journalists because journalists haven't been able to keep their cool in this situation. The media's getting sucked into a match with Trump instead of focusing on things that are more substantial. The media's butthurt. The media had this sense of integrity. The media has, and you know, one could argue that I'm a member of the media, but I've always been so on the fringes of it. I'm more of a casual observer than anything else. So I don't really lump myself in. But the media, specifically the news media, has, I guess, seen their diminished significance. In the digital age, people aren't watching news. People aren't buying papers and magazines and things of that nature, obviously. But you know what? In the digital age, people have looked at these institutions of news with greater and greater skepticism over the last couple of years. The news, the press, keep screaming about how relevant they are. And we as a people are kind of getting our news from other places. We as a people are treating the news with less and less trust. And it's a bed they've made for themselves in a couple of different ways. One, by pandering. Two, by being partisan. By constantly editorializing. By looking to gain something in much the same way as a politician does out of division. Pick a side, stick to it. Attack everything else. Look for an opportunity to attack everything else. There was a time in America where nightly television news was a bastion of truth, of fact. There wasn't editorializing, there wasn't conjecture, there wasn't any of this stuff. The news was something we trusted to bring us the fact of what had happened today. And now, can you honestly say you feel that way? No, you cannot. I mean, there's some folks that go, I always seem to feel like I'm being told the truth when I listen to, or when I watch Fox, or I always seem to feel like I'm being told the truth when I watch CNN. But there's so much screaming and shouting. There's so much clickbait. There's so much money to be made when you skirt the truth and circumvent the truth and don't get bogged down by facts, that journalists have, in the face of a diminished market share, in the face of paranoia about their jobs becoming obsolete in the not too distant future, have very thin skin. And so Donald Trump's able to say, you're fake news, you don't count, you don't matter, that's not the truth. And they go, how dare you, sir? And, well, because they're so bogged down in ideological bias, the how dare yous seem a little silly. Doesn't matter which side of the fence they're on. So, Donald Trump wins when he makes the argument, when he makes the discourse, when he makes the back and forth about a fight, as opposed to his policies, as opposed to what he's doing. If a journalist says, hey, not entirely sure about these tariffs, not entirely sure whether or not these are going to serve America well economically. I know there's a lot of indicators that say right now we're doing pretty well, but over the long term, I see job loss right around the horizon. I see, what about that? Yeah, you're fake news. No, I'm not. See how he did that? He does it over and over again. Kicks people in the intellectual and ideological groin by saying that they don't count, by dismissing them. And it was a great reminder from Jon Stewart that no matter which side of the political fence you land on, truth, fact, nonpartisan information that can't be tied to a narrative is often what's going to best support your partisanship or your narrative. So it's a reminder to you, to me, to all of us, and any journalists that may or may not be listening, that the truth in this case is really the only thing that will allow you to win. The truth, my friend, as always, will set you free.
Sometimes you just know you're done. You're longing for that shining sun. You walk these streets most every day. You're waiting to get washed away.
Now, more AD on the radio.
It was a tough week for the folks over at SNL. They have kind of set themselves up, and they've had an incredible season or two. But they've kind of set themselves up as being, the guardians of sanity and morality. The folks that are going to take down the bright orange Trump machine. The folks that are on the side of everything that is good and right and politically incorrect. And leading that charge was Alec Baldwin. So it was not a good look when he got arrested for punching somebody over a parking spot. We'll get into that story a little while later. And plus, Pete Davidson did this thing where, I don't know if it was him or the writers at SNL, but somebody thought it was okay for Pete Davidson to make fun of a wounded veteran on Saturday Night Live. We'll get into all this in just a little bit. Right now, though, because, we air in a bunch of different cities, but a lot of them are in warmer places. Places like Texas and Florida and California. And for that reason, I thought I would play you Beth Stelling talking about seasons in warm places.
It's hot out for November. Warm weather is one reason I came to California years ago. I don't know how many years I've lived here. I've never seen a leaf drop. Years fly by, okay? The seasons are nearly indistinguishable, which makes it very difficult for me to know when to be in shape, honestly. Thankfully, I'm from Ohio, so there's always going to be haters, which makes me biologically Midwestern. So even if it is a very warm winter, my body knows. It knows what to do, and I just start to build up a meat coat, I don't even... Thank you. It looks good on me, I know. I don't even weigh myself anymore. I just ask somebody to draw me. And if they reach for a marker, I know I've gone too far.
So in case you missed it, you and I will get into the whole situation with Pete Davidson making fun of a wounded veteran in a little bit. Right now, though, let's take a look at the events of today in our segment, My Witness News. What's going on in the world? So much is going on in the world. You know what two of my favorite things are? I love it when people are awesome to one another. I also love donuts. And, it's not often that you get an opportunity to combine these two things, but today we do. Today is a good day. Getting to commit a good deed and overeat on donuts, that is a kind of philanthropy I'm always looking for. There's a guy named John Chan who owns a donut shop in Seal Beach, California. He and his wife Stella have been working together at the shop every morning since they came to the country as refugees from Cambodia almost 40 years ago. But some of his regular customers recently noticed that his wife, Stella, was not there. John told them that she'd had an aneurysm. So he was working at the store every day and then rushing home to be with her at night. His regulars wanted to set up a GoFundMe, but he was having none of it. He said no. Wouldn't accept their help, wouldn't accept their charity. So they came up with an even better plan to help him. Buying all of his inventory every single day. I know, you get to do a good deed and you get to overeat on donuts. Like I said, not bad, right? John's policy has always been to stay open until he sells out. So now that everybody's buying up his donuts early in the morning, he can spend as much of the day as possible with Stella. Unfortunately, he says that she's improving, saying, quote, she can talk, she can write, and right now she's trying to start eating.
Hey, come and support this guy's donuts. He's a great man. Great cause. It's a blessing, really. We need more people like that to just help everybody out in whatever need they have, It's a blessing, truly is.
So in case you missed it this past Friday just gone by, Alec Baldwin was arrested for allegedly punching a guy near his home in Greenwich Village over a parking spot. Yeah, the folks over at TMZ said Alec had a guy standing at the spot to hold on to it for him, but another man swooped in and stole it. There's an episode of Seinfeld that's very similar to this. And, that did not degenerate to fisticuffs. Anyways, Alec got out of his car and slugged him. But TMZ also said there's surveillance video showing the two men in a shoving match, which could make this mutual combat rather than an assault. And mutual combat is apparently not a crime. Innocent or not, Baldwin was booked on misdemeanor charges of assault and harassment and given a November 26th court date. After his arrest, Alec tweeted, quote, "The assertion that I punched anyone over a parking spot is false." And you know what? You know who was kind of sort of the bigger guy in this situation? Believe it or not, President Trump chose not to gloat about it. When the folks over NBC News informed him of Alec's arrest, he said, quote, "I wish him luck."
Alec Baldwin, he punched somebody out during a parking dispute. I wish him luck.
Wednesday just gone by, the Florida Commission on Ethics released an official statement that it found probable cause that Lantana Mayor David Stewart used or attempted to use his position to secure a benefit for himself, or that he solicited something of value from a constituent with the understanding that his judgment, vote, or official action would be influenced. This is according to the Palm Beach Post. He's accused of abusing his power with a constituent who wanted speed bumps installed in her neighborhood. According to the complaints filed by Catherine Padilla, who is petitioning for traffic calming speed bumps in her community, the town's mayor would make sure her neighborhood received the speed bumps if she would have sex with him.
A Florida mayor is accused of soliciting sex from a constituent in exchange for speed bumps. This type of corruption is often referred to as pay to play, but let's just call this one humps for bumps.
So, try as we might, we just can't seem to get Pete Davidson and Ariana Grande to move to the back burner and let us get on with our lives. The latest is, of course, the fact that on Saturday Night Live this past weekend just gone by, Pete did a skit where he gave his first impressions of candidates in tomorrow's elections by looking at pictures of them. And he or the writers at SNL or whoever would be the person that had the buck stop with him made the really dumb decision to include Dan Crenshaw, a former Navy SEAL who lost his eye serving in Afghanistan in 2012, who now wears an eye patch. Pete said,
"This guy's kind of cool, Dan Crenshaw."
Oh, come on, man.
Yo, hold on. You may be surprised to hear he's a congressional candidate from Texas and not a hitman in a porno movie. I'm sorry, I know he lost his eye in war or whatever. Whatever.
So yeah, Pete Davidson decided to include Dan Crenshaw, former Navy SEAL who lost an eye serving in Afghanistan in 2012, as someone who looked like a hitman in a porno movie. Now, the National Republican Congressional Committee demanded an apology, but here's the thing. Crenshaw took the high road. Crenshaw tweeted that he's not easily offended, but, quote, "Vets don't deserve to see their wounds used as punchlines for bad jokes." He said, good rule in life. I try hard not to offend. I try harder not to be offended. That being said, I hope that Saturday Night Live recognizes that vets don't deserve to see their wounds used as punchlines in bad jokes. So there you go. There you have it. There are people on the left, on the right, everywhere that give a lot of credence to the division in America. There's a lot of people that want you to go into that voting booth all angry. There's a lot of people that want you to pull the lever for democracy without even thinking about it because you're blinded by rage. Don't fall into that trap. As we said at the beginning of the show, Beastie Boys reminded us when we needed it the most.
So this is what I got to say to you all. Be true to yourself and you will never fall.
In the words of the Beastie Boys, this is what I've got to say to y'all. Be true to yourself and you will never fall. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do this all over again. Have yourself an awesome night. Vote.